here on a Saturday morning. Y'all should have the agenda. It's a pretty simple agenda. We'll follow that. I wanted to say a couple of things first. We got the final MGT report on March 3rd. And then 10 days later, we were under a national emergency. So, this has been a process, and I think like everything, it's kind of been delayed just due to the state of current affairs and whatnot. But I'm glad we're starting to ramp up, and there's already been work taking place on it. Dr. Johnson and Justin, they'll give us an update on what's taking place with phase 0. But really, this meeting kind of taking and charting a kind of path forward so we can start expediting that process and finishing phase 0 and starting to look at phase 1 as we make our way through this plan, while all maintaining kind of realistic and expectations on what we can achieve and whatnot. So getting started, the first thing on the agenda is looking at priorities as board members. I know there was some discussion in prior meetings about what board members wanted to see us kind of look at, and we never have really had a chance to discover what priorities are in this plan as board members. I know we each had the opportunity to talk to MGT one-on-one when they were here. We gave our input that way, but I thought it might be, doesn't have to be a certain project or anything, but kind of what's important as a board member, for facilities moving forward. I kind of liken it to what Dr. Johnson had the board do when he got here several years ago, about, what do you want to see in facilities in 5 years or 6 years or 7 years. So I'll kind of open it up for anyone to chime in. Just raise your hand and we can do it that way. I guess, Sherry, that's the easiest way to kind of tell on here who wants to speak. So.
Yeah, that'll work.
Awesome.
I can't figure out how to raise my hand, but hang on. I usually don't have to raise my hand. I'm the one looking at everybody else's hands.
Go down to participants.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
And then it goes, then the hands at the bottom of the participants.
All right, I'm gonna raise my hand, make it official.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Thurman.
Yes. Well, I tell you, I met with the principals of my district. Well, not all of the principals, but the ones that were going to be affected by this: Soddy Elementary, Daisy Elementary, Soddy Daisy Middle School, and Soddy Daisy High School. Those were the 4 schools in my area that were going to be affected by this. I met with the principals, except Jill Hill from Daisy Elementary. She had to go out of town for a funeral. But anyway, a report has been given to her about what we discussed. We got maps of all of those 4 facilities. We got them from Marty Haynes was kind enough to print those off and give them to us. So we had an aerial view to see exactly what we were talking about and what we were looking at and what we felt like we needed for our district. So that's kind of where I am with this. I thought that was the best way to do it, is just sit down and meet with them and get the community input. And so we've gotten some of that as well. But the idea in the MGT report of closing Daisy Elementary, moving those kids to Soddy is really just not feasible. If you look at because really Soddy Elementary is landlocked. They have a road on all 4 sides. And to do that, you'd have to get rid of playground on one side of the school or the other side of the school. And plus the roads there, sometimes you already have to pull over and let another car pass. It's not even wide enough for 2 cars. So that is just not feasible in our opinion to do that. Also moving Soddy Daisy Middle to the elementary school is also not going to work because there's like 35 acres at Soddy Daisy Middle, which is a huge campus. And to close the school there and move it to a place where they're going to have to give up their baseball field, their football field, and share it with a high school just does not make any sense really. And so, but those are the things we're looking at in our district. The things that were in the report that really are just when you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, it just does not make any sense. So, but we do agree that Soddy Daisy Middle does need to be replaced because they have found some more snakes, Dr. Johnson, just for you to know that. And they did promise me that they would bring the next one they found to me. So it's going to be gifted to you. So, but anyway, just the Soddy Daisy Middle does have it's a matter of fact, there have been people that have actually gone to games there and called me, said, Miss Thurman, where's the Soddy Daisy Middle School? We're here, and it looks like it's an abandoned building. So of course we did do a lot of facilities updates. I mean, did a lot of updates on the outside to kind of spruce it up a little bit, but the overall facility does need to be replaced. There's enough room there to build a new school behind it while leaving that school intact and just doing much like we did at Soddy Elementary and Gans Middle Valley, or it is Middle Valley now. And so, you know, those are just some of the things that we discussed that we think make a whole lot more sense for us, because there's just no point in moving Soddy Daisy Middle to Daisy Elementary and closing Daisy Elementary. It just doesn't make any sense to us, but that's where I am. And I would tell every board member as well, if they would like to have aerial views of their school grounds. Marty Haynes is real good to do that, and it does give you an overall picture. Sometimes, like we looked at like at Soddy Daisy Middle School, there's a road there that used to be open to come in from the back. I have discussed that with Justin. As a matter of fact, we went up and looked at it. But things like that to make the traffic flow a whole lot better. But if you get an aerial view, sometimes you can see those things maybe you can't see on the surface.
Chairman Wingate.
Sorry. Before I say something, Ms. Thurman, tell me, you said move Daisy to Soddy. That was a concern, the students moving from Daisy to Soddy, and Soddy Middle replaced. But what was the third thing that you said?
Hold on just a minute. Let's see where we were in the conversation. They were wanting to move a Daisy to Soddy, which will not work. And they were wanting to move Soddy Daisy Middle to Daisy Elementary.
Okay.
Yeah. And
okay.
And then to do that, I mean, there's just not very much property there at all. And Soddy Daisy Middle would have to give up all of their athletic facilities that are already there and share with the high school.
Okay. So Soddy Middle to the Daisy property. Okay.
Yeah. That's just not going to work at all for anyone in the whole conversation or anyone in the community either.
Okay.
Because that campus is huge. It's about 37 acres, maybe 30. I can't remember exactly, but it's quite a large campus. Let's see, Soddy Daisy Middle. It's 35 acres. Yeah.
Okay. I was just going to say, when you talk about what's important, what we're doing right now in phase 0, I think is probably identifies with what I really feel like is important. Is, you know, we all see that really big number, and whether it was deferred maintenance, you know, the term we kept hearing before the MGT report, or now the deferred maintenance plus, you know, whether it would be new construction or renovation, whatever it is that we've, you know, that MGT has left us with as far as what would be optimal, you know, for our school system. For me, it really is about being more efficient. And so I'm thankful that in phase 0, you know, that we're already working towards that with taking some of those schools offline that are that have been a large chunk of that number, and not of the total number, but as far as a school comparatively. And the only thing in District 7, obviously we've got a ton of growth out here, and I've said it many times, nobody feels sorry for District 7. Got a lot of newer schools, but my only concerns would be kind of hitting a little bit of what Ms. Thurman said when she talked about roads. And I know that's outside of our control, but just the infrastructure that's around the school buildings, and so much traffic out here, and just kind of particularly the intersection there at Ooltewah, Ringgold, and East Brainerd. You know, just you got traffic going to 4 schools right there at that intersection every morning and every afternoon. And again, I know that's not our charge to fix that, but sure would be nice somehow to be able to lean a little bit more on the county there when we start looking at some of that. And some of that's state road, but some of half of it's county road also. But I am pleased that so far the work that's taken place here at the very beginning, it really is about trying to make us more efficient. So that's all I had.
Thank you. Ms. Hill?
Thanks, Tucker. So my priorities got two perspectives on them. The District 6 perspective, but also the overall county-wide perspective. Since my colleagues have spoken about districts specifically, first, that's what I'll do as well. You know, District 6, different than Joe's district, we are home to some of the oldest buildings in the county. We're also home to some of the most successful programs in the county, and certainly illustrates the fact that a building is not what makes a school great, but I do think that a building is a tool and makes teaching easier, makes students safer. So in District 6, I do think it's really important that as we consider the plans that MGT has brought to us, that because our plan is very much domino effect, specifically in North Chattanooga with the CCA recommendations and the Normal Park recommendations, that we ensure that if CCA is going to be moved, that it does in fact end up in a state-of-the-art arts facility. That community has done an enormous amount of work to improve the building that it's in, with regard to the actual specs of the building. But the more you dig in, the more you see how much more need there really is, and that it's far from state of the art. Speaking about being landlocked, when I talk with my principals, the realities that Carrie Wilmore at Normal Park faces are very different than, for example, Nikki Bailey at Lookout Valley Elementary School, because Nikki has, Lookout Valley Elementary School has enough acreage that she's going to be able to really look at outdoor classrooms, for example, in August with students, whereas Normal Park doesn't even have parking. So I do think that for District 6, that looking at the North Chattanooga conundrum is a high priority. But overall, I agree 100% with Joe, and I think more globally about the county as a whole, that efficiency is important. I would like our overall approach to developing our own phasing, you know, perhaps if we tackle phase 1, because it in and of itself is enormous, but that we make sure that we come up with an appropriate blend of efficiency, academic success, and community impact, because some of the things that seem very efficient could negatively impact neighborhoods. And while that is not our number one responsibility, I do think as stewards within the community, that's important for us to keep in mind.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Mr. Smith. You're muted.
How about now? Sorry. Well, Tucker, I want my buses moved. When we gonna get them buses moved? I know that has nothing to do with facilities, but it really continues to impact our high school up there. And I know what a challenge that is. We've been talking about it really since I came on the board 6 years ago, and we still hadn't got it done. And that remains priority 1 for me up in my district. I was up there this morning at the track, and you know, I got to say, and this has to do with facilities, what a great job that we did up there with those tennis courts and the track. And as my wife and I were walking this morning, there was probably about 40 people walking on that track this morning, and it's that way just about every morning. So you know, that's just something I just want to throw out there that I think we can be proud of as a system. I always try to look at things through the lens of what's best for, hold on a minute, my phone's ringing, me cut it off. I always try to look at things through the lens of what's best for the entire system, not just what's in best for my district necessarily. I'm a little confused because, you know, the MGT report talked about building a new school and combining DuPont and Alpine Crest and Rivermont, and kind of the conversation shifted at some point, I think, now to not be Rivermont, but to be Hickson Elementary. So I want to get clarification on all that, just exactly what we're thinking there. Alpine Crest, which is not in my district, that's in Kathy's district. That's where I went to elementary school about 100 years ago when me and Steve Highlander went together. But yeah, but I mean, it's a really, really, really old building. Hickson Elementary is an old building. DuPont's an old building. So, you know, I still would like to see something happen with those three buildings. And then going back to the high school for just a second, I'll hush, is, you know, the high school over there, that gym, you know, it's the only gym we have, and it's small. They can't host tournament games because it's too small. And they can't practice in the afternoons, everybody, because it's just one gym. So it's a challenge. So that's high on my priority list, is getting a gym for the high school. But again, you know, I try to look at it through the lens of what's best for the whole. But if we get those buses moved, then we can do some things at Hickson that we've wanted to do for several years. And I don't want to beat up on anybody, because I know Dr. Johnson, Justin, a lot of people have worked hard to try to make that happen, and it's just a challenge. But I hope we can make that happen soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Anyone? I don't see if there's any hands raised. Since we're going district by district,
Dr. Highlander.
Oh, Dr. Highlander.
Yeah.
Dr. Highlander.
Sorry.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? I'm not muted, am I? Can
No,
you
you're
hear
good.
me?
You're fine.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Thank you. I do appreciate it. I think we've got Harrison's coming in mine / Coritz's district, and I'm real thankful for that. Looking forward to it. I want to make sure, when are we looking at what are we looking at for Lakeside? That's one question. Are we looking at moving it all into Harrison or just the zone part? I want to be clarification on that. And I know what Joe's saying about Hickson Gym. When I went to school there, that was the gym we had, and that's still the gym they have, and it's not tournament ready. And when you've got 2 or 3 teams taking, it's really hard for them to have shifts on basketball practice or wrestling tournaments or whatever. And Central's kind of in the very same way. They've got a little cracker box gym that's and Lookout Valley, which is not my district. I know that's Jenny's, but they have an even smaller gym. So we really have some gyms. I'm concerned right now that as many facility needs as we've got, with the economy the way it is, we're very limited in what we can do. And while we can make plans, I've talked to some commissioners, and I reached out to them. They didn't reach out to me. I asked, and the general consensus I'm getting from the four that I've talked to are that we're not going to get any more bond money till we know how the economy is going to go. And I hate to be a naysayer, but we can make long-term plans. And I think that's great. But right now, we can't spend money that we don't have. So I agree with Joe that Hickson needs another gym, and Lookout Valley does, and Central does. 100%. But I just am a little concerned. We also need some lights on Central's track. But and like you, I've been out by Central, and buddy, they are packed. Those people walk on those tracks, and the community is thankful for what we've done, and I am too. But but I am concerned that we're sort of spinning our wheels in the mud right now because we just don't have the money to follow through. I mean, I want Chattanooga School for the Liberal Arts to have a decent facility. They've got to, but we just don't have the money to develop the Sears Pennies properties right now. We've got what, $24 million, and we're looking at just the one just for CSLA at Northgate would be more. We're $18 to $20 million short. So I think we're foolish to go in that when we don't have the money to build it. But anyway, I'm open for comments. That's just some comments I've made. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Highlander. Ms. Hill?
I'd like to assert that perhaps we, for the sake of this conversation today, that we acknowledge what Steve said, that the economy is uncertain, and that we are going to have to determine how to finance anything that we do, and put that to the side. Like if we had a big Post-it note, that would be a big fat fluorescent green or red Post-it note. Like how is this going to be paid for? Because that's going to continue to be a question. But I think that, but what I've noticed is that when we've had conversations like this over the last year, really, that can derail us from making progress toward where do we want to head? What are the values for this? What's our vision and our facility standards? So thank you for bringing that forward, Steve. But I would ask all of you, I mean, if we can all acknowledge that that's real, but we don't need to get mired in that today. Perhaps that bigger thing could be a conversation for another session.
Thank you, Jenny. Ms. Mosley?
So I got on the call late, so I'm trying to figure out, are we going district by district or are we just kind of raising our hand? Is that what we're
just raising our hand?
Okay, so I did want to share that I know with the MGT results for or recommendations for District 5, there was a lot of concern and conversation then, and there's still a lot of concern and conversation now as to the recommendations that were given in closing Brainerd High School, and moving it to the Dalewood location and combining Dalewood with Archer-Nine Middle. Of course, there was concern initially with the Lakeside recommendation. I think that is those fears have somewhat been calmed because there have been some conversations from Dr. Johnson and the executive cabinet at the district level to Lakeside as to what that looks like for their transition. Of course, we already knew what was happening with Hillcrest and combining Hillcrest and Harrison into the new school in District 5, which we're really excited about that. We haven't had a new school and that is a conversation that's going on, of the excitement of that school coming into the district, as all of our buildings are pretty much old city buildings. And like Rhonda said, I think it's great to get an aerial view, and I think I probably will do that because I've never done that, but I don't need an aerial view to know that those schools have been around since my mom's very seasoned, not very seasoned, but she's slightly seasoned, and my dad was, and those schools have been around a long time. They were in high school or when those schools were there. So we know they're pretty aged. And so that's been a big concern about when are we ever going to get a new school. So to get the new elementary school is really exciting, and to have the diversity coming into the district the way it is, it's really good, because we know that District 5, according to district lines and zonings and redlining, let's just be honest about it, it's not the most diverse district. So it's really exciting to have that happening at the top of the district coming up. But I do know that a big concern about the Brainerd High School recommendation for closure and moving to the Dalewood location is the constituents are talking a lot about Dalewood being a landlocked property, and just what would that look like for all the, I don't want to say amenities, but of course the provisions that we make athletic wise and academic wise at Brainerd. And of course, Brainerd's property and campus is much larger. And we just got a brand new track over there, which has been a very, very, very long time coming. And I'm very protective of that track. And so is the staff there. So we keep our track locked right now. It stays locked unless the students are using it. Or if family, if staff is there, because honestly, our constituents use it, but they haven't always been the best at keeping it clean and maintaining it. So we are excited to have it, and we want our students to be able to use that, utilize the way they need to. So we are protective over that track, but we're excited about it. And the football field has had some, football stadium has had some repairs done to it. And so they're just big concerns like, well, what about those things if we move there? Because those clearly Dalewood's track is pretty much almost concrete, and their football. It's just a lot of concerns, not even above the athletic facilities there. And then of course, and I expressed this to MGT, the MGT staff as well, and Dr. Johnson and the executive cabinet, the recommendation of combining Archonot Middle and Dalewood, to me, and to a lot of people in District 5 and even in Hamilton County, we just see that recreating the situation that we've worked so hard to try to alleviate at Brainerd High School. Because you're combining neighborhoods and communities that just typically would not be going to school together. There's a lot of other social issues and concerns that you will be combining there. And so I just don't think it's good for us as a board, having worked so hard to get that feeder pattern, Wilmore, Dalewood, and Brainerd on the right track, to turn around and reverse that, or take some steps backwards in that aspect. And I understand, and of course they love to be in a new school, who wouldn't? But I'm concerned about the social aspect of that and what that looks like for continuance of some of the social disparities that are going on. So I did want to just share that. And I know the community, everybody keeps saying, why would they do that? Why would they recommend that? And so I just told you that is a recommendation, of course, that ultimately ends up as a decision of the body, of us, the 9-member body. So I do want to share those things, because those are still major concerns. I still get calls now about, are they going to close Brainerd High School? And I'm like, well, right now nobody's in a building. So I will say about CSLA and the recommendation to go into the Sears building. I was actually excited about that recommendation when we first got it, because there was, I thought it was ideal for CSLA being a non-traditional school environment to go into a non-traditional setting, and what that would look like, honestly, for the students, what that would look like for that list of students who are wanting to get into to CSLA. And because we know that the old Elbert Long, it was Elbert Long when I was a little bitty girl before it became CSLA, is an old building, and we've all been in there, so we know what that looks like, right? And I've seen I've seen old store buildings be turned into other things, schools, churches, etc. So I know that can be done. And I was really excited about it until the new price point came up. And now I'm like, whoa. And I have a whole lot of feelings about that and how that transpired. And I just hate that that's happened, because what could be so beneficial for our kids, of course, has now become a business issue, of which we as a governmental entity do not have the same playing skills, I should say, to be able to do what has occurred. I know there was a lot of concern about that going into a mall setting, but honestly, I thought about what that looked like for the economic growth in the Hickston area. Like, if people were coming out there to get their kids, what did that look like? If they needed a shirt, if they were going to run to Old Navy, if they're going to go to the store, if they're going to run to that Walmart there, if they're going to eat dinner out there because they're already there. So I thought that it would help, not help, but increase some economic growth in that area. And I still feel that way no matter where it goes, because of the diversity of the student population, what that would look like for any area that it goes in. So those are just some concerns that I have, and trying to look at things in a general perspective. And I know that we all have concerns about buildings in our areas. And I just want to make sure that all of our kids are able to walk into buildings that they are proud of, that are aesthetically pleasing, because you learn better when buildings are aesthetically pleasing. It's like walking into the Ritz-Carlton versus walking into maybe the old that old hotel that used to be on the Ridge Cut. I mean, you know, we know what they looked like before they renovated it. So aesthetics is really a good thing for learning, and bright and vivid colors, and teachers that are excited and they can take ownership of it. And I hope that whatever plan that we come up with long range allows children to be excited about coming into their buildings and learning.
Thank you. Ms. Lennon?
Excuse me for stepping out for just a minute. I had to take a phone call. District 2, I think our schools are pretty much in good shape across the board. Addressing the, when I first got on the board in 2016, the big discussion was, which I thought was kind of interesting, was, they're going to combine DuPont, Rivermont, and Alpine Crest. That was always a big discussion, and I could never quite understand that, because day one, when I started the board, we started renovating Rivermont, and it was awesome. It was a great project. Totally transformed that school, and Rivermont went from not having full capacity to being a school now with full capacity, because they became an open enrollment school. Open enrollment school. Excuse me, my words are not coming out. And it really is a school that they're proud of. I mean, it's completely painted. It's lovely. Alpine Crest, every time I walk into that building, yes, it's old, but they keep it in pristine condition. They have great facilities outside. It's not great for students with special needs just because of when it was built and it's on levels, but they do have the special needs children in one area of the building. But it is a great neighborhood school. The children that go to that school love that school. So I quite never really understood why they want to combine those 3 schools. I don't know, what how they did that study. And just looking at all of our schools in Hamilton County, I would think that might be lower on the list than, say, CSAS, Normal Park, Tyner, Brainerd. I don't think that one's as high up on the priority list as some of the other schools that have really big deferred maintenance needs. That's just my opinion. I think we have a lot of schools that are in much bigger need than combining and spending a lot of money at making a big mega school for DuPont, Rivermont, and Alpine Crest. There was a lot of discussion for a lot of months, and I don't know what happened to it, about the Shackelford Ridge Park facilities up at Signal Mountain, just because of the ownership of the fields. And I don't know, Dr. Johnson, you might know where that is. I kind of think that was all a political thing, in my opinion, of what's going on with the ownership of those fields and who gets to play on them and who doesn't get to play on them. And, I don't know whatever became of that. It kind of stopped when the school board elections came open, and I don't know if anything was ever transpired. We were going through different scenarios with that, and it was never fully brought to the board for discussion on that. And that's going into Signal Mountain. Those are all the fields, because those are all they're grants, and the town of Signal Mountain owns some of those fields up on up on Signal Mountain. And it's also noted that the roads going into Signal Mountain are bad, so that is a problem. And so we discussed that the county kind of needed to take care. I don't know if you all have been up there, but the road going in, there's only one way going into Signal Mountain. And so that's, a concern. But I think that's like that. I think, Brian, you and I talked about that before. There's other schools that just have one way going into them. And so I think that, we're working on that, and talk to the county. We had many meetings about that, but then it just kind of dropped. So I don't know really where we stand on that, because they presented it to Signal Mountain before we presented it to the board, and it kind of got lost in the shuffle there. For me, the number one priority, and this came when I first got on the board in 2016, is CSLA. And I went back and looked at information, but that was the very first, we had to list our priorities. I don't know, Caritza, Joe, Dr. Highlander, if you remember this, we listed in order what our priorities were for schools, and CSLA was one of them. And we even went back, and I kind of even pulled it up of, Lee McDade even sent it back to me, and back in excuse me, back in 2014, even the county commissioners had said that CSLA was one of the top priorities for county commissions, and that was back in March 26, 2014, of how they wanted to be able to try to find funding to help CSLA find. He encouraged those seeking new facilities for CSLA and East Hamilton Middle to continue their efforts as future funds become available. CSLA has been on the table since 2014. And in 2016, when I got on the school board, we were talking about it. And in March of 2017, we voted to have CSLA. And that was one of the top priorities. And it keeps getting pushed back. It keeps getting pushed back. So my main, I think it's time for CSLA to be a top priority in Hamilton County, because that's from 2014 and what is it, 2020? I just think it's time for CSLA to have top priority. And that's just my, and Joe Smith, I hear you too. I do think buses need to. I think that's not going to be that big of an expense. I'm close to your area in Hickson, and I see those buses need a home. And I don't think that's going to be that big of a cost. I think we can kind of squeeze that in there as well. But as far as priorities, I think CSLA needs to be a priority. Caritza, I'm like you. I was very excited about that Sears plan, and I hate like anything that was swept out from under our feet. But I'm like you. I don't like the fact that it was going to cost us more money and after the fact. But I just think that. That's my priority. I would like to hear what from Justin about the deferred maintenance and how we're going to tackle that as well with our business. And we have to be diligent and mindful about what all of our costs are for building. I know we have a lot of things in the works right now that we are focused on, and I don't want to do anything. We can't do anything new, but as far as priorities, I think we have to focus on CSLA.
Thank you, Ms. Lennon. Mr. Smith.
Yeah, I guess you'll get there, Justin, but I hope that Justin Witt's he's on here, isn't he? I think he is. I hope maybe take a brief deep dive into those numbers up there at Northgate. I mean, it kind of shocked everybody, but when you really look at what those numbers are, the company that has bought that property that wants to sell it to us, they're not making the kind of money that one would think right on the surface. So I hope that Justin will kind of maybe briefly break that number down. I was excited about that too for a number of different reasons, maybe helping CSLA, although I'm not convinced we need another high school in Hamilton County. You're going to have to convince me of that, but a K through 8, I was excited about that possibility. And then also the elementary school. So I guess when everybody gets through talking about their districts, I'd like to hear from Justin and maybe him break that number down for us, when everybody thinks it went from 3.5 million to 8.8 million. And that's just not entirely accurate when you understand, the breakdown on that number. So when everybody gets through talking about their district, I'd like to hear Justin kind of explain that number a little bit. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Smith. Ms. Thurman.
Yes, and I totally agree with Kathy about Alpine Crest. Matter of fact, Alpine Crest is the only school now in the city limits of Red Bank. Because Red Bank Elementary is nowhere near close to the city limits of Red Bank. So I hate to see them lose Alpine Crest. I too went to Alpine Crest Elementary in 4th, 5th, and 6th grades. So I hate to see them. That is a great neighborhood school. I hate to see anything happen to that school. And I'm Kathy, I just don't think since they've already taken Rivermont off of the trifecta that they were going to do, I just don't see why now closing, why it's just a main concern to close Alpine Crest. Also, about CSLA, Joe was absolutely correct. There's just no justification for another high school. There's a couple of things I wonder about CSLA. I know that we want to try to preserve the property where they are, but they're about 35 acres there or something, if I'm not mistaken, where their property is now. And so we're going to hold on to it maybe for future growth. Well, why is future growth any more important than what we need now? I'm just not real sure I understand that, unless we're wanting it for a zone school, perhaps. I don't know. But there's quite a bit of property there where CSLA is situated now. Also, the property, and I've brought this up before, and I know it's kind of controversial, but I'm still going to put it back out there. We do have the 17 and a little bit over 17 and a half acres over at Washington Alternative. That is, I think, a big enough campus for a K through 8 school. There's football fields. There's football field there. There's baseball field just right across the road and down about a block that could be used for different kinds of softball, baseball, whatever they need. I think that's something we already own that property. We're getting ready to vacate Washington Alternative. We're also getting ready to vacate Lakeside Elementary next year. That's another piece of property that's very close there, that maybe one of those school buildings could be used for the elementary school and the other one used for the middle school or CSLA. And maybe we could get all of that for the 24 million. I don't know, to renovate both of those buildings to take on CSLA. But we have $24 million to deal with. We do know, at least we have that, and we could go ahead and do something for CSLA if necessary. But before we build another high school or other schools that certainly need things, like I said, Soddy Daisy Middle for one in my district. And also here we are back talking about putting more money into maintenance for diverted maintenance. When we do our budget, this should be one of our top priorities, and it just hasn't been. Teacher raises and budgets. Let's do those two things and get them out of the way before we even start adding all these other positions and all this other stuff. And it just has not been a top priority for us. And we can say it, but what we say is not what we do. So, but more budget and more money has to be put in the budget for maintenance. And until we do that, we just need to quit talking about, where we're going to get money for maintenance, because it's our own fault that there's not more money there, because we could have put it there and we chose not to. So, but anyway, like I say, I'm going to throw that out there. I know that some county commissioners have gone over and looked at the Washington Alternative site over there, as well as the Lakeside Elementary site. And there's been some discussion ongoing with that. One of the commissioners said, we just need to talk to some architects and say, we have $24 million. What can you do to get kids in these two buildings? And, that's just something I think that we need to look at as well, instead of talking about spending millions and millions more money on, especially a high school that we do not need. Just doesn't make sense to me.
Ms. Mosley Jones.
I forgot about this, and I don't know how I forgot about them. I think I just got caught up in talking about the two schools closing. But I do want to come back and talk about Tyner Middle and Tyner High, and the recommendation to close Tyner Middle, of course, and not even do anything with it. They pretty much were saying it would cost us more to do anything at that building than to keep it. So there's a piece of property there if we were to do that. And also about the Tyner High building, the Tyner Middle High. And I know that when we were also prioritizing about CSLA, that there was priority. We did talk about making Tyner Academy and middle high school. And I don't know where that discussion I think we've kind of lost that commitment. And I want to bring that back, because Tyner Academy, both middle and high, are very, of course, outstanding institutes, but Tyner has several key future ready institutes that tie right into that Volkswagen Enterprise South corridor, and those businesses are working with us, and they're doing the best they can, of course, in Tyner. But once again, we talk about Tyner a lot. Joe is an alumni from Tyner. Rhonda talks about her brother being there. I know lots of people that went to Tyner, and that building hasn't had anything done to it. Probably could be even pre Rhonda's brother and Joe, honestly. I mean, I remember that it's been about 35 years, because I asked the date. It's been about 35 years since anything's really been done to update that building. And I'm 39, so clearly it was before I was born. So I don't want us to forget that, because we did talk about that, and the community is kind of, that, they do ask about that. And I don't think they've asked as much recently about it, because I'm pretty sure they feel like that's just a given, that we're still going to address that, because we did talk so much about that and have those community meetings. So I don't want us to forget about Tyner Middle High Academy, and what we committed to them, and that does leave another piece of property. I do want to quickly piggyback off of Rhonda's recommendation about Washington Alternative, and I know we talked about this before. Every time Rhonda say this, I know I'm gonna get a call today, because somebody's listening. Every time Rhonda brings that up, somebody from that area calls me like, we don't want another school over there. So I do want to share that's very a very big concern for them about putting another school right there in this day and time. And of course, there's always been a school there, because Booker T. Washington was there. Then of course, Washington Alternative has been there. But I think the news, when I came onto the board, they asked a lot about when we were going to move Washington, if we were going to move Washington, so forth and so on. And so I think now that the news has come about that we were going to move Washington, they kind of like, please don't put anything else back over there. In that nature, of course, they're okay with the old Don School area has, I'm drawing a blank, but they have the exceptional ed. Is exceptional ed right there? Is that what's right there? Exceptional ed offices, some of them are right there. And they're okay with that, but they're just like, please don't put another school back over there. And definitely, I've heard, please not CSLA, because of it's such a high population and the traffic and everything. They just don't want that in the center of their neighborhood. And that's kind of a weird area where that school is now, because of the growth in the area. So I could understand that, because for traffic and bottlenecking and a whole lot of other things that would change that district. So I just wanted to share that there. But I do agree that we do have the lakeside property. If we were able to do something there, I don't know what that looks like. I do want us to be, to show fidelity in our commitments though. And so once again, as we talk about the priorities that we made a couple of years ago with CSLA, we also did them with Tyner. Of course, we did it with Harrison and Hillcrest, and we're following through on that. So I just want us to be able to complete with fidelity what we committed to. And it's a tough conversation, because finances are in a tough spot. Our society's in a tough spot, but I don't want us to forget about Tyner Academy in this process.
Thank you. Ms. Hill?
I think Rhonda's hand was up before mine.
Oh, sorry, Ms. Thurman.
That's fine. I just wanted to tell Caritza, you're exactly right, Caritza, about Tyner. And my brother and sister both went to Tyner. And my brother went to Washington Elementary as well. So I know a lot about that area. My younger brother did. Yeah, we forget that we were going to put the school there where Tyner Middle was, CSLA there. I don't know why you say we still own that property. Why can we not, just tear that school down and maybe build one there? There's absolutely no reason why we couldn't do that for CSLA on that property. That was the original plan anyway. We just did, they said it cost too much said it would be cheaper to build a new one than tear that one down. Well, why don't we tear it down and build a new one as well? So you're exactly right about Tyner, and I don't want to forget about that school either, because they are doing a lot of good things over there as far as a lot of the work they're doing with Volkswagen and what have you. But also the child care offices are located over at Booker T, Washington. And I'm over there on that property. And, those offices can be moved over. We have 40th Street. A lot of people don't realize we have a central offices at 40th Street and over at off Bonnie. We have two different ones. So, there's always room where we can put those offices there if we have to. there's no reason why they have to be in one particular place because they take care of schools all over the county. So, but Caritza's right. We could do that at Tyner Middle if we needed to.
Tucker, what I wanted to add was with regard to the discussion about CSLA and going K-12. Before I was on the board was when you all made the decision to make CSLA a K-12. And in phase 0, MGT is working with the assumption that CSLA would be a K-12 with 1,300 students. So when we think about when we say that we don't need a new high school in Hamilton County, I think it's important to remember that there was already the plan that there would be additional high school seats at CSLA in phase 0. That's on page 46 of the MGT report. So, the other changes took that into account.
I'll go, Mr.
Yeah, you said there was already a decision to make it K-12. I don't remember ever voting on that. Did we ever vote on that? Anybody? Did we ever vote on that? That was just it just came out of nowhere. They wanted it, but I don't think we ever voted on it.
No, we didn't.
We did talk about expanding.
Yeah, we talked about it, but we talked about
it.
Well, did you not decide to get money from the county to move CSLA into a refurbished building in the Tyner area for a K-12? How is that not?
Yeah, it would have. That's what we talked about.
So was that not a decision to make it a K-12 at that point? And if we had it,
no, we knew we were going to move CSLA. I don't know that we ever fully decided to make it a K-12. That they were going to.
When we looked at looked at those preliminary renderings that they sent us, it talked about, it showed like where elementary, middle, and high school. Because I remember looking at the talking about the gym. I remember talking about the entrance. Like one entrance would be where the lower school would go in, one entrance would be where the upper school went in. So I do remember the conversation. I don't know if we necessarily voted on that per se, but I do remember the conversation and the renderings to show how it could look K through 12. Well, how they could. That's what the architectural preliminary draft renderings. That's what it showed.
Okay, so I guess that was codified to enough of an extent that MGT, all of their work was based on one of their knowns, and the known knowns of the plan was that CSLA was going to become a K-12. So the MGT recommendations are expecting 1,300 students to be in that building.
Yeah, well,
and the community would love that.
Well, not all community would love that. They would like to have a school in their own community for neighborhood schools, but that's okay too.
Well, I think it's a yes and, right?
No, because either they get a high school that we don't need, or somebody else gets to replace the school that they do need. So that's
one way to look at it.
No, that's the only way I can look at it.
Mr. Wingate.
I was just going to try to add some context, if I remember correctly. I think when we talked about the CSLA, particularly at the Tyner Road location, much of what could be offered was going to be contingent on space, and I'm not necessarily just talking about the school building itself, but also just what property would be left over for facilities also, because I do remember having those conversations with Mr. Gerald Harris about, being able to accommodate, both schools' extracurricular activities. So I don't remember one way or the other. I just do remember that the high school part of it really was going to be predicated on, what type of additional construction could be added to that side of the road to accommodate. And then after that, does that even allow for any of the other activities that they want to go along with their everyday curriculum? So anyway, if that helps, I don't know.
Thank you. So I'll kind of go into my district real fast, and then we can move on to Dr. Johnson and Justin giving us an update on phase 0. So District 8, Of course, I have CSLA in my district, and the conversation that's been had is kind of what I was going to bring up. I was, ecstatic about the Sears idea and plan. I had some reservations about the pricing and stuff like that. I also think Lakeside, that's been brought up, is a good opportunity. And then also, I think, like Rhonda said, there's 35 acres at CSLA. And I've been kind of grappling, is the future more important than the present with that? And so I think those are conversations we can have kind of going into phase 0 after this update. I also have Barger, which is an amazing school, but it, I think, was built in 1950, and it is in pretty bad shape as well. And so I think, how do we look at keeping the programs that school offers in that community, and that Brainerd and Belvoir community is important. I think the idea was to move it over to the Brainerd land, and put a new CTE school in that Barger property. I think that's something that a CTE program, everyone talks about Kirkman and what that did. I think bringing something like that to District 8 and Caritza's district is something that could be very beneficial for that area. And then also I have Eastridge High School, Eastridge Middle School. Everyone knows the story about the athletic facilities there. Some of the worst I've seen in probably ever. When you look at their weight room and their locker room and everything along those, and their track, and we just took those back, I think, in December or January. So really looking how we can process and get those up to where they need to be, along with updating that facility, which is called for in phase 1. But I think Spring Creek, the addition there, could help relieve some overcrowding at some other schools. And then how do we plan for that growth and that infrastructure out in East Brainerd as we move forward, are some of the things that are important in conversations I've had with District 8 people. But moving on, I don't see any other hands raised about that. Dr. Johnson or Justin, either of the Justins, Dr. Robertson or Mr. Witt, I don't know who wants to handle kind of doing a phase 0 update.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate everybody this morning and the conversation. I think I would go back just now. I want to make sure I was taking notes here and try to address everybody's, or not everybody's, but I think there were a few questions that were out there. I know that Rhonda, you asked about the CSLA property and current need versus future need. I believe the thought is that you've got Westview, Appleton, and East Brainerd Elementary that are all at 95% plus capacity. And in fact, East Brainerd Elementary is like 118%. And thinking about the need for K-5, frankly, in that area. And if you built a K-5 in that area, could you do something to, maybe alleviate some of, to pull a school in like a Barger or something in that area? So anyways, there is a zoned school need in all candor right there in that pocket, in that corridor. And so here nor there, whether you build CSLA on that site or not, we're going to have to identify another piece of property in the East Brainerd area to build an elementary school. And ideally, it would be on the opposite side of, as Chairman Wingate was speaking to, of really that kind of 4-corner point that you've got with Westview, Appleton, East Hamilton Middle High, and East Hamilton Middle or High. So anyways, that's one piece. Dr. Highlander, you asked about Lakeside and the zone students versus the magnet school students and who would go to Harrison. The thought is that the zone students would be zoned to Harrison. They would become a part of that zone. And then we'd phase out those magnet school students that are a part. So that would go they would end up going to whoever's coming there from a magnet would eventually end up going to their zone school. There was a question about deferred maintenance, and I just want to remind the board that over the last 3 years, we've spent $30 million plus in deferred maintenance. And so well beyond what has traditionally been spent. In fact, last budget cycle, obviously we weren't able to this budget cycle because it was just tight everywhere. But last budget cycle, we spent about $15.2 million and are still spending that. And, you know, some of the things that we've done when we talk about, you know, just what we've done without even, you know, I was having to go to commission, building the Sell Creek Stadium. We did that out of our funds. Redoing the Howard School, the middle school, because of the growth there, we did that out of our funds. Roofs and HVACs. We've done a lot of that. Windows projects that are going on now, and Justin Wick need to give an update on some of those. And so a lot of that's work that we have been committed to within our budget. You know, we are at a point with, you know, the amount of need that's there, where we're biting pieces of the elephant, but you just can't get at some of the depth in the way that you really want to over time. And then, you know, I would concur that CSLA and Tyner, you know, CSLA and Tyner are two projects that are just of extreme significance. I'll be, you know, really frank. The facilities that they're in are just bad, and that's the absolute truth. Not that there aren't other facilities that are in dire need, but with those two sites, they are really bad. And I think even MGT's grade ranks them as two of the lowest, if not the two lowest, in our district. And so, you know, it kind of makes sense that those bubbled up in your conversations, and we absolutely would concur. And then just the last thought I would, you know, kind of throw out there is around, and I know that Joe Smith asked about getting into the Sears project property specifics, and when Justice can do that. But, you know, I think the board needs to give us guidance on, you know, there's efficiency and effectiveness, right? And so everything that's the most efficient isn't the most effective. And then everything that's the most effective, obviously you get it. And so, you know, we know, because we also hear the narrative of things like, okay, I'll use Rutherford County as an example. Rutherford County has 40 something schools, about the same size as our district. We have 70 something schools. And I always tell people contextually, a couple of things are different. One, our square footage, as far as we're 576 square miles, the square footage of 576 square miles, that looks different. But then also the thing that looks different than Rutherford County is the terrain, right? So we've got hills and valleys and mountains and, you know, and everything here that makes it a little more complex from the standpoint of just, you put a school there and you don't have to worry about it. You got a bus kids, you got to figure it out, you know, and all this different stuff. And so we will never be, and should never be, striving necessarily to be at 45 schools or 48 schools, because a similar district our size is at 48 schools. But I think there's a real conversation to have amongst the board, and you all got to give us guidance on this from an efficiency standpoint. Do we want to continue to work towards right sizing our system? Because when you do that, you know, one, you get students in better facilities. You absolutely get students in better facilities. When I look at the old Harrison, I look at Hillcrest, and I look at Lakeside, those students going into the new Harrison that will be state of the art, you are going into better facilities. But the other element of it is there are some operational savings. And when you generate operational savings, that creates the additional revenue so that you can address the strategic priorities that you all as a board have established for us. And so, you know, I think it's critically important for us to really understand, because, you know, I value, if we had a blank check, the small neighborhood schools is a way to go all over the place, you know. But we don't have a blank check. And so how do we find the efficiencies, and how do we make sure at the same time that we're being true to, you know, remaining effective in what we do? And so guidance on that. So in regards to phase zero, and then either the Justice asked you to speak, you know, even deeper to phase zero, and probably also give an update on all three of the projects really that we have going on now with Harrison, East Hamilton Middle, and then obviously the rebuild of East Brainerd Elementary School. But in regards to phase zero, specifically with Harrison, you know, the couple three recommendations was to you know, do an addition to Harrison, which you all approved a few months ago, and is underway. to be able to address Lakeside, and then secondly to identify a site for CSOLA. And I think there are a lot of options that are out there. Obviously, the Sears building was an option that was out there. Whether you look at a Lakeside option, or whether you look at another option that's out there, I think all those things are on the table for you as a board to tell us and what you would prefer, and we will go after that, having thrown an idea out there. So Justin, I guess either Justin's just a couple things I'd ask, just to update on all three of our projects. Go a little deeper into the Sears. When I say all of our projects, the 3 buildings that we have, a little bit deeper into the Sears numbers. And then thirdly, probably Justin Witt, just a bit of an update on the projects that are still underway with 50.2 that were allocated last budget cycle, which really was 12.1, because about 3 million of that was technology infrastructure and other things that was needed. So Justin's.
Yes. So quick update, and I'll just start with Harrison and go from there. So Harrison Elementary, again, part of phase 0 was that addition that would allow Lakeside to be part, the zone students to be part of Harrison Elementary. And so that project is on track for the addition to be ready in December. And so we would transition the old Hillcrest and the old Harrison into that new building. Done quite a bit of work over the last couple months with the Harrison Hillcrest community to help them understand what it's going to look like the next 4 or 5 months leading into December. Had 3 community meetings that had a couple hundred, 250 or so that attended those Zoom meetings and filled them in. So the old Hillcrest site will be the K through 2, the pre-K through 2 site, and the old Harrison will be the 3 through 5. There's going to be a little bit of staggered time in between their starts so that transportation and school-age childcare can be provided. And so we had really good meetings. I know that Ms. Young is having some additional meetings with her community this summer as they're leading up into August, but that is on track. Again, the plan would be in August of 2021 for the Lakeside Zone students to move into the new Harrison building. So it does give us a little bit of time to work out some logistics before all those students come into that new building. So that's kind of an update with Harrison. In terms of the new East Hamilton Middle School, we did run into a little bit of a delay with some fire code with the main entrance. Fire marshal kind of last minute required us to do some additional spraying of the entrance to meet fire code. And so we're going to get it done, but it's going to be pushing right up until the end of July. East Brainerd Elementary, of course, will move into that building until we can get East Brainerd back on schedule and on track. That is the last meeting we had about that. And if Justin has any more information, it was Friday before last, and everything looks good. They didn't find anything unexpected. They're starting to build back up the second levels and should have East Brainerd Elementary ready to go in December. And so again, over Christmas break, we would transition East Brainerd students back to East Brainerd Elementary, and then the East Hamilton Middle School students over to the new East Hamilton Middle School. Any questions about that before I go into the Sears cost?
I would just add, if you hadn't been by East Brainerd Elementary, it is coming along really well. They're progressing really, really well, which obviously that was an unexpected, project that we want to make sure we get done as quick as possible.
All right, so if there aren't any additional questions, talking about the Sears price structure and where we are with that, and I'll run through some numbers, and these are numbers that we've talked about with the developers and why we're getting to that 6.4 million asking price that they have for the Sears building. So when they purchased it for about 3.5 million. What that doesn't include, though, is that 20% of that was actually owned by the mall, by CBL. And so when you take that 3.5 they purchased from Sears, you have to add an additional 20% to that, because they had to purchase the rest of that from the mall. So the actual purchase price is about 4.375 million. On top of that 4.375, they had obviously some closing costs, some interest on 4-month loan that was about $300,000, and then had to work with some of the other tenants, for example, like Belk, where there's a joint agreement on parking space. So to buy out all the other people that are on that joint agreement for us or for them to get the entire parking area adds an additional $650,000. So their actual all-in price when they purchase that building is about $5.325 million. So the 6.4 asking price, they are obviously going to make about $1 million on it. But it isn't as much as, obviously, when you talk about purchasing it for 3.5 or 4, it's not that 2.4 million difference. So you, again, just to break it down, you've got an additional 20% to buy out the mall. You've got their closing costs and some interest on those loans, and then the buying out the agreements with the other tenants to make sure that the parking space, the parking lot, all that acreage is free and clear. So that's where we get to the $6.4 million asking price. Any questions on that or conversations, I guess?
Dr.
That's
Highlander?
not the pennies too, correct? The 6.4?
Yes. Sir.
That's the Sears alone.
Is that Justin breaking up?
Yeah, he's breaking up.
Hey, Justin.
Yeah. But Steve, that is just for Sears. That was not including the Penny's location.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, Mr. Highlander.
I'm not the cost. We have.
I'm gonna try to message him. I hope he's not still talking, Dr. Highlander.
He's muted.
2.4. Is it better now?
Oh yeah, we can hear you. I'm sorry. I think we got the answer, Justin. But you have anything to add? Dr. Highlander was getting ready to speak.
Okay, thank you. You know, I'm not disputing that the business people, you know, need to make a profit. My concern is that we don't need to try and purchase something that we don't have the money to develop. You know, we have approximately $24 million to develop for CSLA, and if we pay 6.4 million for it, that's going to leave 18 million, and the projections to develop that were anywhere from 34 to 39 million. So we're going to be 18, $20 million short. I don't see purchasing it there when we don't have the money to develop it right now. And I mean, we're going to buy that building and just sit on it. It doesn't make sense to me, but that's just my common sense approach. Thank you.
Ms. Thurman.
Okay, all of these costs that they incurred, if we had bought this building, we would have to incur these same costs. So it was going to cost us a whole lot more anyway, correct? So the amount of money we were told it was going to cost the building in the beginning, the only thing we probably wouldn't have had to worry about was the interest on the money, because the county would have been paying that. Or I guess, well, no, we'd had 24 million, but we still didn't have enough to purchase the building. But we would have still had to go out and buy the other parking from the other people. Am I correct? I mean, because the amount of money we were told it was going to cost. So really, we were kind of misled in the beginning that that's what that building was going to cost, when in reality, it was really going to cost us a whole lot more, because we would have had to purchase the parking from the other people. we would have had to pay an extra 20%. Is that what I understood? Like from CBL or somebody like that? We were not told all of that when we were told the price of that building, if I remember correctly.
That's right. That's right, Rhonda. That's right.
Well, and again, we would have had some room to negotiate, and some of those prices might have been different for us. But you're right. I mean, we didn't know the. Anytime you go into an agreement like that, you're going to have to do some due diligence to find out some actual costs and things associated with it. You know, so they could have been lower than what I just gave you. That's why I put the disclaimer that these are the costs that the developer gave me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I sort of say those are the kinds of things that we need to know before it's put out there that that's what it was, because it really is a kind of it's just not a correct number to be putting out to the public that this is what we were going to pay, and then they were going to make this much money and all that kind of stuff, because it was going to cost us a whole lot more as well. And that's probably something we may not have even considered had we known all of the facts in the beginning.
I will say that that's probably something we would have discovered if we would have done the LOI and, you know, the due diligence. Because just like you know, once I saw the other incurred cost, it was like, well, this wasn't going to be even for us 3.5 or 3 million. So, you know, I think the LOI would have, once that, you know, flushed out and Justin and Dr. Johnson did their due diligence, that would have came to us. Justin, do you have anything else, or Dr. Johnson on that? Update wise?
Well, no, and again, I think that when you talk about the cost of the Sears building, a lot of the intrigue of that building is the savings that we would have by having a structure already in place. You've got walls up, you've got all the ground dirt work done. So part of the intrigue is, you know, in the long run, we would be saving money on building a new school because you have all that infrastructure already up.
Yeah. Ms. Hill.
You know, going into something brand new, we've got that chicken and the egg problem. It's hard to sign a letter of intent when we are unsure about the price, but until we do the full due diligence, we don't know the full scope. And while I don't know if ultimately the Sears building is going to be the best fit for Hamilton County, I don't want us to become frightened of looking at new ideas, because there are unknown unknowns when you're headed into something brand new. So as we look at the overall vision and values for our Blueprint 2030, if innovation is part of that, I'm going to be pretty committed to having grace for seeing some bumps in the road and pivoting. But I've also, like, recognizing what Rhonda said, that these costs that they are projecting, and I do wonder, have they actually paid these costs yet, or have they only just bought the building? You know, the additional 20%, have they actually written the check to CBL for that? The tenant negotiations, are those actually complete? Is that a hard number? Would they come back and tell us that we have to pay them more because, you know, TJ Maxx was a holdout? I mean, all that's an unknown, that if we were to decide to move forward with a letter of intent, that we could get down to the actual numbers. All that to say, I'm still uncomfortable with, looks like about a $900,000 profit now. Well, no, let's see. About, no, a million one. I'm still uncomfortable with that. But I weigh it against the overall savings for the county. And I'm wondering what value are John Woods and Sam Issa bringing to this transaction that makes their services worth $1 million to Hamilton County Schools. kind of thinking out loud here, but in talking with Mr. Issa, I came to understand that over time he's developed a good working relationship with CBL. And so I do, sometimes it's good to have a guide, and worth it to have a guide that can save you time and money. And so in that way, I would be interested to better understand how his knowledge of working with CBL would help us quickly navigate that 20% ownership by CBL and the tenant negotiations. It's possible that there is value there to Hamilton County Schools to have them as a guide. Is it worth $1.1 million? I'm not convinced yet. But then when I also think long-term, if it potentially could save the taxpayers upwards to $50 million on 2 new schools, that's no small thing either. And at what point is it appropriate to hold your nose and start building? Recognizing what Steve said, that we shouldn't move into a project if we aren't certain that we can afford to do it. However, a letter of intent does not mean a letter to purchase. So, I mean, that we are committing to purchasing the property.
Mr. Highlander.
Thank you, Mr. McClendon. We have, according to the CEO of CBL, we're looking at having, he made the statement that he thinks likely in the next 6 months to a year, there may not be any retail in either Hamilton Place or Northgate. And I noticed the papers listed that CBL is not paying interest on their loans. And so I am, like Mrs. Hill, I am not against coming out of the box and thinking about how we do schools, but I'm saying we may have it looks like we're going to have additional opportunities to purchase some different facilities. I think CSLA would probably love to have a site at Northgate, which is closer to the present facilities, where I'd say the majority of their students come from. And I'm not against that. I'm just saying we don't need to rush in and pay a profit when we may need to be getting a bargain real soon in the near future. And also, once again, I'm just saying I hate to have to purchase a building that we can't develop and leave it sitting empty. But like she said, a letter of intent is not a guaranteed purchase. Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
I like what's been said. I mean, looking at the letter of intent, we're not making an obligation to anything. I've still got to be convinced that we need another high school in Hamilton County. But thinking, that area out there, and I think even maybe Carissa mentioned this, is from just a purely economic development standpoint and the additional traffic it'll create out there in that community. And I've had a lot of my constituents, a lot of them don't want it there, a lot of them do want it there. And the ones that seemingly want it there are the ones that want to talk about the economic development. There's going to always be retail. So I disagree with Steve just a little bit. I mean, the big box retail, that's a dinosaur, but there's always going to be retail. In fact, there's a lot of construction going on at that mall right now, kind of, on the outside of the mall. So there's always going to be retail. I think the big box stores like the Belks and the Sears and the Pennies, those kind of things are dinosaurs now. But I just don't know what could hurt to have a letter of intent and just really roll up our sleeves and really take, put that under the microscope and see if that's a possibility. Sometimes I know I do this at home. My wife's a better economist than I am, but we worry about how much something's going to cost us today, and that becomes a big part of the conversation instead of, well, what's that going to save me down the road? And so I just think there's a lot to be said when, you've already got you know, you've already got a building there, the walls are up and the parking lot's paved, and you know, so down the road it's going to save us a lot of money. I know it's going to cost us some now, but
That's a great
all those
point.
conversations, you know, have got to be held. But the one thing that I'm going to keep going back to is I got to be convinced there needs to be another high school in Hamilton County, period. So, but I still really like the idea of a CSLA at that mall on some level. So I hope we'll continue that conversation and maybe vote on and approve a letter of intent for Dr. Johnson, Justin, that our team to have conversations with John Woods and his team.
Ms. Thurman.
I guess I'm having a hard time. We talk about how they're spending all these millions they're going to save us money. We already have some property that we can already deal with, the property we already own. We could save the entire purchase price of the building and put that money that we were going to pay to put in the building on the new building that we're getting ready to build on a piece of property we already own. So I'm not seeing, because some of those already have the infrastructure there. They already have the parking lots. They already have a lot of these things. I'm just not seeing why we need to spend a few million. I mean, I don't really care where it is, but if it doesn't make any difference where the school is located, and it's a magnet school, and so it really doesn't make any difference. Hamilton County already owns some property. And why we can't go ahead and use some of the property we already have, because now we're going to have empty school buildings sitting there. And we all know what happens to empty school buildings. We have to maintain them. We have to keep the grass mowed. We have to, people break windows out of them. There's all kinds of awful things that happen to our empty buildings. But that's why we tried to vacate. We tried to liquidate all the empty buildings we had, because it was costing us so much money years ago. We had to just get rid of them. And some of them we had to give away. So, we just need to look at using some of the property we already have. I mean, that would save us more money than anything. Just don't spend any money we don't have to spend.
Ms. Lennon.
Just a couple of questions, and maybe I didn't hear correctly, but when you're talking about the parking lots previously, was it mentioned anything about the parking lots in the contract about the theater parking lots? Because I know that is a big, that's a big issue, the theater parking lots, and there's also some apartments back there that need to be thought about that join the mall back there. I think there's just so many things that we haven't thought about that are going to go into play. There's the theater, and then also, has the building been checked for asbestos? And I don't know if that was in the report, in any of the documents that they gave us. And is that something else that we're going to have to pay for? And is everybody in the mall in agreement that they want a school in Northgate Mall? I think that's something really big to consider. And I do agree with, I do agree too with Rhonda about, have we looked at every single facility that we have? I think it's important to, and I think our county commissioners would expect us to look and do our due diligence and look at the buildings that we do have. Is there not, maybe you all have, and I would be anxious to hear, Justin, you all probably have, and I don't know it, but have we looked at every building that we have in Hamilton County? Is there not anything that we can do to reuse a building to, have put CSLA in a building or the existing property? I mean, can we, we talked about making about possibly doing a zone magnet for CSLA, is that a possibility? But I just think that there's, let's exhaust all possibilities before we go into, I just have hesitations about going into I loved the renderings of Sears when we did it. I thought that was phenomenal. But it seemed like it once that the new the offer was made and it got pulled out from under our feet, it just kind of like a dark cloud went over it. And it's like, why are we kind of spinning our wheels on something now? Let's put our energy into something else and start moving forward with something else.
So Ms. Lane, if I can address the parking lot. So the Sears parking lot would be free and clear of all the other tenants. The JC Penney's parking lot is the one that's tied up with the theater and a couple of the other areas. So that we are clear at Sears. In terms of asbestos and the other things you've mentioned, there's obviously a due diligence period if the LOI was approved, that even though they've done some engineering and architectural studies, we would obviously want to go in and make sure that everything was good, that there's not any additional cost. But the due diligence period would allow us to make sure that there isn't unexpected costs that we're not aware of now. In terms of the other properties, I would lean on Justin Wood. Obviously, he's been in this position longer than I have to know what work went in years ago to looking at other properties for CSLA. But the due diligence period in that LOI is what would protect us from anything unexpected coming up.
Would we have to pay for those studies, Justin?
Yeah, so I mean, we have obviously contracts with vendors that help us with asbestos, so we would want to get some of our people to make sure that we're looking at it and that we're just not walking into something blind.
And how much have we already paid for, say, the drawings and the renderings that we've already had done by the architects?
We did, those are pretty rough renderings, so Justin can address that. I don't know that we paid anything for that because it was just a sketch.
We've already had we already had DH&W locked in for the CSLA and Tyner, so it's already a part of what we've got them locked in for. So
great.
They're in. I mean, they will, because how the process is going, they will build the next school for us. So
great, thank you.
Okay, if I could ask a question, I believe for Kathy's question, I believe we've already paid the architectural firm about $500,000, have we not? To develop the middle property and assess that.
Yeah, so that's a part of whatever they're gonna do. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Hill.
The way that our bureaucracy is structured, every potential idea seems to take a long time to vet. The lakeside property sounds interesting to me, but it's a new idea that even if the architects are in on the project, there's a finite amount of time that a vendor can provide at no additional cost. So I think that if this board is really intentional about, we want to look at 3 options total, and we we need renderings for all of them, and we need budgets for all of them, and then we decide on which way we want to go. Like, we need to be reasonable about what we're expecting from the team, from Brian's team, and recognize that when we can lose opportunities by slowing the process down, because I think we did sort of drag our feet some on Sears, and ultimately, it is what it is right now. So I don't have a problem with looking at Lakeside, but what I wouldn't want to do is take another 3 months, have the Sears lingering, take 3 months to look at Lakeside, and then we look at both of them and they're like, yeah, but what about XYZ? There's a saying about, not sacrificing progress for perfection. And such as the world is, I don't know that there is a perfect choice, but I think we have a lot of good potential choices here.
Ms. Thurman?
Yeah, Dr. Johnson, since it's not in my district, I just recall in the MGT report, you talked about doing something else with Barger Elementary property. Of course, there's only about 9 acres there, and that's just not a lot of property to do just a whole lot with. But are we vacating that school as well? I mean, was that one of the, because we talked about putting a vocational school or doing something there. And I mean, and I know that that's another thing we never talk about. And I'd really like an update on is the new vocational school that you were working on with county. We don't ever hear about that. And a lot of people don't know what's going on, but it is. I'd like an update on that as well. Also, are we going to get a chance at the end to get an update on some things that are going on in our district at the end after we finish this discussion? Tucker, are we going to be able to do that as well? Just get a real quick update, because I have some construction things going on up in my district I'd like an update on after we finish the Sears discussion. But anyway, there's about another piece of property. I just didn't know really what was going on with Barger. I've heard it thrown out there. I don't know exactly what's going on.
Yeah. So I'll address both of those briefly. So to your second question about the construction site, we had conversation about the development of a construction school. At Garber, the old Garber school that had been out there and been working on it in the background for several months. And really had got to a really good spot in it. Had even met with some of the folks in the governor's office and had some really good conversation. And Mayor Kopchak, several others have been working on it, the Association of General Contractors. And the pandemic hit. And so we were, I would say, we were, I won't say at the finish line, but we were about ready to say, okay, let's bring something to the board in regards to the site, and either giving the site or doing some kind of lease agreement, because our students would have had access to the construction site, et cetera. I don't think that project is dead. It's just halted right now because of what's happened with COVID-19. So that's kind of where that is. We've kind of halted our meetings over the last 3 months, but we were meeting on a very regular cadence. And it's still, I think it's still a very important project, but it's one that, obviously because of what's happened, it's been kind of halted. In regards to Barger, the recommendation from MGT, so this is a part of the, and I know that I'm going to sign on my computer that says internet unstable, but in regards to Barger, the MGT recommendation was for it to be a CTE site, so similar to Sequoia, Career Technical Education, Vocational Education, similar to Sequoia, to bring one that's a little more comprehensive into the hub, so to speak, of the city and corridor to serve some of our other schools. And so Sequoia can meet the needs of Side of Daisy, Sail Creek, obviously Sequoia students. You can probably get some of Red Bank and Hickson, maybe even Signal, but then also this one would be more tuned to serving Howard, Brainerd, Tyner, East Ridge, the schools that are in that area. So that was their thought. Barger students would then in turn, either based on how the zone lines are drawn, either go to a school that is surrounded is adjacent to them based on zone lines, or they would go to the new elementary school that was on the CSLA site. And so they'd be zoned to that zoned school, I think was the recommendation in the MGT report. So a lot of moving parts there, but that was the thought.
Mr. Smith?
My final thought, and I'm gonna have to get off here. I really like what Ms. Hill said about just reminding us that we got a lot of options. We really do. And I hope what don't get lost in this, and I think maybe it was said earlier, Rhonda said it earlier about Washington Alternative. I'm in that school a lot because that's where a lot of the kids that I work with come out of that school. But Steve Highlander and I, and one of our county commissioners went out there a couple of weeks ago and kind of walked that, that whole campus and football field and, the baseball field. Actually, I didn't know this, Rhonda, you may not either, is right there. It's right in behind the building. It's not down the street. It's right in behind the school. So there's a lot of potential over there. I know the community has some concerns about having another school out there, but I really like what Miss Hill said. We've got a lot of options, so that's a good thing. That's a good thing. And all this is complex. I've appreciated the conversation. I've got to go meet some 5 and 6 year olds and play baseball. So I got to get off here and. But just great conversation. I would like us to continue to at least explore and have a conversation about the Sears Pennies thing. And once again, maybe we could put this on our next agenda to at least approve a letter of intent so we can really take a deep dive. So I got to run, everybody. I'm sorry.
Before we move on, and I think Jenny asked for like a little 5-minute break, and Dr. Johnson, just to kind of wrap up Sears. I think Jenny, you kind of were going where I was thinking. I'd really like this to see, 3 different options brought to the board, either hopefully, August meeting, Sears being one that's already kind of out there, kind of what that looks like. Possibly the Lakeside. What does that look like using the money that we have, and then possibly using the CSLA property, in hopes that the board makes a decision off of one of those 3. I think it's Sears allows you to get into a newer building quicker. You don't have to have the build time or anything like that. It also provides just kind of out of the box thinking and something that really fits with CSLA. But I think Ms. Thurman brought up a good point. You build on land that we already have, you're saving right there, $6 million that goes directly into building or refurbishing a school. So that's the way I would like to see. I don't know how the board feels, but I'd like to have 3 options before us, and we can make this decision sooner rather than later. I think Jenny and Ms. Hill and Ms. Lennon brought up that CSLA, the conversation really picked up in 2014, and even before that. So this is 6, 7, 8 years down the road. Even in 2017, Harrison's almost got a brand new school completed. East Hamilton's almost got the new middle school completed, and CSLA is still sitting in a building that's about 70 years old. So I think, from what I've heard, we're all eager to do something. It's just, what is that something? And I think that the board, we've heard the Sears, but let's look at some couple other options, and then from there, kind of make the decision and move forward. It's kind of what I'd like to see and charge Dr. Johnson with bringing to the board in August.
I'd like to clarify what I was saying. I think the idea of bringing multiple options, I think if we're going to do that, we need to be realistic about how detailed they can be. And frankly, how many unknowns would remain in something like that. We need to be aware of our expectations and making sure they are realistic. I mean, I don't see that a team could bring us 3 different, the Sears option is already, we see that there were unknown unknowns, right? The Sears option, we've got that one kind of fleshed out, but those other 2, we can't, I would not expect to be able to see full rendering sketches like what we see for CSLA. If we were to do that, I would be really impressed. But if we're going to move forward with that 3, I think, yeah, the pros and cons of each would be nice to have kind of iterated out, and general cost expectations. And I think it would be important to keep that at the 1,300 student capacity, whether you're looking at K-12 or you're looking at K-8, because 1,300 is what we're planning for. So, and I think K-12 is what the community has been told they're getting, and I think Hamilton County as a whole would like those seats. So I'd like to see it stay K-12.
So just for clarity, I think what what I hear you saying, I want to be clear that we provide what's there, then also speak very candidly about the reality that we are in uncharted territory right now as every other district in the country, really, and trying to reopen schools, and that's where a lot of our time and energy and focus remain. But so we've got the Sears, JCPenney's there, and kind of an idea around numbers there. Obviously, the Lakeside want some numbers on a ballpark on what it's going to be, and I share this, and you all know this, and we've learned this. You know, if you had a blank check, you'd build new schools every single place, and you know about within, you know, a little bit what the cost is going to be. You know, when you start going into renovating old schools, or, you know, retrofitting or adding on or doing anything, you do get into some unknowns. You know, you get into is there asbestos? You know, you get into you know, plumbing issues and electrical issues and just all kinds of things. So we can get pretty solid within a range around Lakeside, what that looks like, the footprint of that property, et cetera. And then I guess the third option that I'm hearing is, you know, a new school on the current CSLA site. So those 3 options are what you're looking for. I don't think we'll be able to get renderings per se of Lakeside, but I think we realistically could. So I just want to be clear that I'm hearing what you all are requesting so that we can work to provide that.
Yeah, and I think being realistic about it is you know, the number one responsibility for the board. But I also think you know, we're getting to a point where we got to do something, and I think, you know, we know that, and you know, if we got to work a little harder and do a little work to make sure, you know, we're talking about getting them into a school, you know, in the next year or two, is something that we need to really push and work on. It's been a priority for years, and you know, I think we need to really push to get something done. That community, that school, they've been patient. You know, it's their turn to see something done, and a commitment from the district, you know, from us. And I think if we can start looking at those 3 options and see them on paper, the board can give a real clear direction from those, you know, kind of where we want to go and moving forward. Ms. Thurman.
Yes, Dr. Johnson, that was the Washington Lakeside. You'd almost have to do both of those together for a CSLA. I don't believe there's enough room on either side to probably do everything they need to do. But since we're going to vacate both buildings, and those buildings are very close together, like I say, maybe the elementary school at the old Lakeside Elementary, and the middle school at the Washington alternative site. So when you say Lakeside, it's really going to have to be both, because I don't think there's enough property there at Lakeside. I think I say there's just not, what, about 9 acres or something like that. So there's not a whole lot of property there. And also, I thought Caritza's idea about Tyner Middle School, I mean, we're still going to have that property across the street from the high school that we can do something with. So that might want to, you know, I don't know what 3 options we're going to choose from, but that's still an option that's on the table. We're still going to have that because that school is going to be closed when you renovate the high school to put the middle high there. So that's another huge piece of property that we can look at as well.
I'd like to back up what Caritza said too about Tyner High School, or Middle High School. My mother passed away last year, but she was in the original Tyner High School building, which is the main part of that building now. The original part, it was built during the Great Depression by the Roosevelt administration. My mother graduated there during World War II. And so they've done a lot of things, but we need to take care of Tyner High School and follow through on the renovations there. And I think we are, but I want to be sure that we take care of Tyner too. Thank you.
So I want to be, there's not money to do all, you know what I mean, to take care of.
Amen.
So in my family, my kids, we have a book called If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. Some of y'all with young children or grandchildren may be familiar with it. You know, if you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to ask for a glass of milk. And if you give him a glass of milk, he's going to need a napkin to wipe his face. And if you give him a napkin to wipe his face, he's doing some crayons so he can color. Like, it just goes on and on. And so I think, like, even where this conversation has headed just in the last 3 minutes, to go from 3 options to, but we could look at this one, and we can look at this one, and we can look at this one. Like, I think we've got to narrow down. Even 3 is a lot, frankly, but we've got to narrow it down so that Brian's team is using their time wisely, and so that we as a board don't get mired in the muck of too many choices. I'm comfortable with the 3 that Tucker listed: Sears, Lakeside, CSLA. Based on what Caritza has said about Washington Alternative, I'm not as comfortable with considering looping that in. Also, what I'm hearing from the city council people out there, that just does not sound like something the community wants. So I like the 3 that Tucker listed.
Yeah, and Rhonda, I think Lakeside has, and Justin Witt, if you're still on, I think it's up 24 acres or 17 acres. It kind of goes back and goes all the way back to those baseball fields. The baseball fields used to be our land until we deeded them to the city, but I think it's 17 or 24 acres there. So yeah, I know it's asking a lot for those 3. One's kind of already flushed out, and you know, the realistic.
To be honest, just so you all know, like our time and energy, but our focus will be on the Lakeside side, because we kind of know the CSLA piece. I mean, and honestly, we know within reason what it's going to take to build a 1,300 student school. And so the real, you know, I don't call it a scavenger hunt, but the real challenge for us will be figuring out the Lakeside site. Can it accommodate a 1,300 student school, or what can it accommodate? Because that's the option we'll bring to the board. Like, hey, look, we can do something on the Lakeside site. Wouldn't be a 1,300 student school though. You know what I mean? Or either it is or it's not. You know, we can do a 1,000 student school there. Here go your options. Do you want to consider that? This is what it'll cost. So we'll spend the majority of our time, because I think the other 2 options are pretty clear. Or pretty easy to get at. We kind of know the CSLA, the peer. So just to
okay, Dr. I mean, that's fine, but I mean, we still have the football field there. We didn't have to worry about a foot because it's so close to Washington Alternative. I mean, we have a lot of options. That's what I'm saying. They're just so close together.
Yeah,
you can figure both campuses. I mean, things on Washington campus can be used by CSLA without having to reinvent the wheel. That's fine with me.
100%. I think that's again, we look, we just want to present options. We've got this huge, as a district, we've got this huge facilities puzzle that we're trying to put together. We're not beholden to any idea or any thought. We just want to move the ball down the field, in regards to improving our facilities. And so we absolutely will jump all over looking at the Lakeside side. And I think, to your point, Ron, as we start, like, we need to think differently about our facilities. And I keep saying that, like, we need to throw everything out there on the table and kick some of the stuff off and pull some other stuff back on. This is an iterative process that we've got to have. And sometimes it takes that out of the box idea to get us to a place where we have something that we can actually massage and work with. But I think the sharing of athletic facilities and looking at some of those kinds of things and leveraging that, all those are things that are on the table. And then at the end of the day, once we look at something like this, we feel it's really important to, and I know you all do too, to take it to that community that's impacted, and so when I say take it to that community, obviously CSLA. So let's say Lakeside is a viable option. Well, then once we really get our arms around what that looks like, then we got to have conversations with CSLA. We need to go have conversations in that community, you know, because I think those things are important. But we'll jump all over this.
Do we want to take about a 5-minute break before we get into phase one real fast? Or we want to plow through real fast?
Move on.
I feel differently now. I don't know. I'm up for wherever, but if we're getting close to a cutoff spot, I'll say plow. But if we, you know, so whatever works.
I'll keep my legs crossed.
I don't think this going into phase one will take as much time. It's kind of and really I think the conversation we just had with Dr. Highlander and Ms. Thurman about Tyner, you know, kind of leading off the finishing phase 0, getting that planning sewed up and everything, which would be for CSLA. You know, looking ahead, what do we want our first priorities to be in phase one? You know, a phase one, if you could say it like that. You know, if there's anything in phase one that you have that kind of sticks out to you about what our number one priority should be. We've heard about Tyner Middle School and Tyner High School and whatnot. Or if you have any questions about kind of a lot of those are domino effects in Miss Hill's district. But I just kind of wanted us to start that conversation with phase one.
Tucker, if you don't mind, I can share my screen. I've got phase one pulled up here.
Yeah.
Just to give you all a reference point. So this is, can everybody see that?
Should be able to. Ms. Thurman.
Yes, on phase one here, we've already talked a little bit about Alpine Crest. Like you say, since so many of these are domino effects, you have to do this before you do that. I mean, I'm looking, like I say, Soddy Daisy Middle is never on any list, which I have never been able to understand why we couldn't get it moved up on the list and the conditions then and all the portables that they've been there at least about 35 years or something like that. It's just crazy, or maybe 30 years. It's crazy how long those portables have been there. And it's never on any list. And I just don't understand that. But like I say, a lot of these things are domino effects. You have to close this school to do that one. And up at Soddy Daisy Middle, I mean, it's sitting there on, like I say, 35 acres. A new school could be built right behind there without having to do anything else. And so if we get all of these done before you even consider a Soddy Daisy Middle, we're looking at 10 years down the road. I mean, some of these things are going to take a long time to do. And right here's another one, you know, a new school for CCA, you know, wanting a K through 12 program. Well, we need to take care of some of the neighborhood schools we already have. And like I say, Soddy Daisy Middle's not even on here.
Yeah, Soddy Daisy Middle's in phase 3. So
well,
I guess it must have had better overall facility scores. We could pull that up.
Oh, I can.
Well, but here again, like I said, adding another whole program for a CCA, that's adding, here again, more schools, more staff, more cost. So
the background on the CCA, just to clarify, it's actually not adding more programs. So MGT did bring the idea to go K-12 with that, with the thought that you would combine the Barger program and the CCA program in a single building. There's been a lot of conversation about how realistic or appropriate that would be educationally to have because of the audition process. But keep in mind the idea about moving CCA is because we have 2 decrepit elementary middle buildings within sight line of CCA that don't have adequate parking or on and on and on and on. So that's the thought there. It's not so much about expanding the CCA program, though would ultimately give us the ability to have more seats potentially for CCA, which could reduce our waiting lists.
But here again, it's a magnet school, and it doesn't do anything to alleviate any overcrowding or take care of neighborhood schools. And so
but it would help with the neighborhood schools that are right down the street from it, actually, because they are overcrowded and they are zone magnet schools, but they're largely just a zone school. So it would help in that way. But you know, the Tyner Point.
CCA, don't you have to audition to get in there?
Yeah, but the reason for the movement of the CCA building is to accommodate the neighborhood schools. That's the why of that, because those are very, very landlocked. They don't even have parking lots, or the lower school, Norman Park Lower School, does not even have a parking lot.
Well, I know they have plenty of parking up at Chattanooga City, the old Chattanooga City. But anyway,
yeah, that's part of why we were talking about moving it. Yeah, great point.
But still, it's a magnet school.
Yeah, it is.
Neighborhood school. But anyway, I see Sunny Daisy Middle School on here in phase 3, and like I say, we're looking at how many years down the road? 10 years.
So I think, yeah. So this was a 10-year plan. Any of these things are movable, you know, based on the board. But many of them, I think, as mentioned, do have dominoes. I think what I've heard in conversation this morning is that, you know, if you kind of and I'm always careful about ranking, and I would just here's the caution with rank ordering is, you know, I think as we're trying to think outside of the box with how we address our facilities. Sometimes when you force rank something, there's another opportunity that may that may present itself, and you're so beholden to the ranking that you can't be nimble enough to move to whatever opportunity that is. And so I think that's something for the board to consider. But I know that in phase 1, and I'm sorry, I know I was scrolling all over the place, but I got how they've marked the regions and how we are really in our regional setup. But anyways, I think I heard the board say that the Tyner middle and high conversation would be kind of, you know, if we looked at phase 1, it would be in phase 1 of phase 1, so to speak, if you kind of, you know, kind of split the phases up. And then I guess, you know, honestly, I guess from there, it is up to the board to really, you know, dig into all the things they want to move into phase 1, or the things they want to move out of phase 1, what's kind of next, you know. I think all those things are conversations.
Well, I see in phase 1 here, you still have the DuPont Elementary Schools there, and to replace, and that's not happening. So there's one thing that can be taken off the list, because you say you're not wanting to include Rivermont in that anymore. And seems like Alpine Crest is pretty much satisfied with where they are. And so, and we're not talking about buying the property at Northgate. It doesn't look like, to combine 3 schools. We don't even know what 3 schools. We don't have the money to buy the property just for it to sit there. So that's one thing that could be taken off the list. And like I'm saying, something else that, you know, there's a lot of things here that are just not doable at this time. And I think we need to, you know, I'm just more about neighborhood schools because they don't have a choice about where to go except to their neighborhood school in many instances. So, you know, I think we need to look at those schools to be moved up on the list in the phases.
Ms. Hill, did your hand up?
Yes. So this conversation to me illustrates exactly why I would like us, before we really start digging into all this, to determine our vision and our values for our Blueprint 2030 plan, because these have been ranked according to need and efficiency. And we as a board need to determine how we also inject academic success and community impact into the overall vision for this plan. I'm not comfortable with willy-nilly moving things around from phases, because I see that this is focused on addressing major issues in the first phases and moving on to schools that have less significant needs. And I say that acknowledging the fact that a great majority of our schools have significant needs. One of the things that would be very important to me is that we make sure that we keep an eye on equitable building, keeping racial equity in the forefront, that we don't overspend or overbuild or spend the majority of our money in these phases all in one part of town, but that we really make sure that our students all over the county are seeing improvements in their school, but also within reason. You guys, as we talk about bigger gyms, I think about leaking roofs. When we talk about having tournaments in gyms, I think about the kids in downtown Chattanooga who get flooded into their portables. Like, academics to me have got to be at the forefront. That's one of my big values, is going to be the academic impact of these. I think it's a slippery slope to start looking at phase one and, wishing and hoping on what kind of order we want them to go in when we don't even have a shared measuring tool for how we value overall to the system, the project, and making sure that it aligns with where we really want to head. I think that's a big conversation we need to have.
Yeah, and I think the point of this was just to put our eyes back onto phase one and start that conversation going forward. I think if this is doable, Dr. Johnson, I know we're already going to hopefully be looking at those three options, really, looking at maybe, the Lakeside and CSLA property for CSLA. Maybe we schedule another facilities workshop before the August meeting so we can look at that. And then during that time, board members really kind of dive back into this document. I mean, it has been since March since we've kind of, had this by our side and look at it. And we really take a look at those values, envision that we have, do we want to make sure that we are being equitable in doing your magnet programs and your neighborhood schools? How do we make sure both of those are getting equitable resources at the same time, because both are equally as important? Or how do we look at this and say, we just need to make sure that the board is on one page with our values and kind of principles as we move forward. I just really wanted to get us looking at phase one as we move forward. And we can put that on the calendar for the August meeting and give people about a month or so to dive back into it and come with a list of things that they have for they would like to see as we move forward in the actual planning stages going forward.
So Tucker, I don't totally understand a list of things we would like not, I hope you're not talking about like the projects we like, our little pet projects or anything.
No.
Help me understand a little better what you're saying.
I mean, dive into what our vision and
okay.
Yeah, I mean that kind of list, not an actual this is 1, 2, 3, not ranking, but what do we as a board see as our vision and values as we move forward in facilities? Because I think you're right, and I think Dr. Johnson has said it is that will be key in what moves along in these conversations that we just had, about Saudi Middle and CCA. That can be solved when we really flush out those visions and.
Okay, thanks for that.
I think to the point, for us, and again, we'll operate at the board's pleasure in this regard, but we can't say that we need to create operational efficiency, and we know the answer to that is right sizing our district. But then every time a school comes up that could be right sized or brought together, we say, no, that's not, let's leave that one alone, And so I think we just need direction on, and I want to say this, I do think it's important though, that we also take stock in, just what's been done really over the last the last little bit. So like even this Harrison project, we're going to take 3 very old deferred maintenance, liabilities almost off of our books as they are, and getting them in a brand new, in a brand new facility. And so I think there are some things like that have been done. If we can, and I always try to say, like, there is a path to accomplishing some of what we need, to moving this ball down the court quite a bit. There is absolutely a path to it. But we've got to kind of lift up and see the forest, somebody can see the forest with the trees and really take a look at the forest and say, okay, we can really grab hold of this and get our capital situation under control and really slowly and methodically bring our square footage footprint under control and increase our operational efficiency. And then there are some situations where we're going to have to, I would think the board's going to have to say, hey, look, this is just an effective, way of operating over here, and we don't need to touch that. We need to leave that alone, whatever that is. And so, I just think we need direction on, really the pleasure of the board in regards to, it's got to be, hey, Brian, we want you to go really aggressively after creating efficiency with a mindfulness on effectiveness, or, we're not really worried about efficiency as much. Let's try to build new schools and renovate, because all those different strategies or ways of approaching it have different price tags, but then they also have different long-term implications, for the system. So that's just a need I think we have.
Yeah, and I think leaning on what Jenny was saying, that we could, use that August work session is, to flush that out and give some direction to that. Ms. Thurman.
Dr. Johnson, another thing we need to take into consideration, I know you were talking, I think Rutherford County, what county were you bringing up earlier that you were kind of comparing us to? I can't remember what county it was. But another thing that we have that a lot of people don't have is the river. Mm-hmm. The river cuts us right in two. And it a lot of schools that I know at one time when we had a new computer program and it was dividing up bus routes and things, and it didn't take the river into consideration. And they had people, from Soddy Daisy going to, Harrison. I mean, it was just crazy how they had it going, because they didn't even take into effect that there was a river there. So, but that's another thing that really makes us have to have more schools, and we probably would have to have if the river were not running right through the middle of our town.
That's you're 100%. It was Rutherford County that, and I just have seen people, and unfortunately, the politics come into school systems. But
my brother lives in Rutherford County. I've been up there many times.
Yeah, but it's not that there's some conversation, like we're gonna have to tell the public like that. We want to be as fiscally responsible as possible, but there's some things that just don't make sense. It doesn't make sense to have a kid on a bus for 2 hours. When we can, to just for the sake of having a couple less schools, like that may not make sense in places. But those are all things that
we have to take them out into consideration. Like we had a EduLog that had buses turning around the middle of Daisy Mountain, to come back down, because they didn't take in fact that it was a mountain and not a flat. So there are a lot of things we have to consider.
Yeah, geographically, it's totally different than Rutherford County and Hamilton County is so different, night and day.
Awesome. Anything else? Or I think we can end it here and plan on bringing it back in August.
Thanks for convening us, Tucker. This was really useful.
No problem.
Yeah, it was very good. Thank you so much.
Tucker, can I nail down? So we're saying August. So there's really two options for the board. I just want to nail down for calendar purposes. On the 17th, we have an agenda review. That's normally the Monday before the Thursday. So there's 2 options there for the board that I would submit. We can choose at some time on the 17th, either before or after during the agenda review, or the 20th, before the the formal school board meeting. So I guess that's something we can send out. You can send out, Tucker, and just get feedback on which board prefers, but just trying to nail it down.
Yeah, but pleasure of the board on that. It doesn't matter to me the 17th or the 20th. I kind of think the 17th kind of seems a little better because school board meetings can be quite long already. But I'll send that out and we can just take a poll and a pulse of the board, especially for our members that had to sign off early or are out of town. But we'll get that squared away and plan for that week of August. Awesome. I guess I'll.
I just want to say for the record, there's not 9 more people I'd rather have spent early Saturday morning with.
You are a lying liar, Brian.
And let's just make this.
Well,
this a
it might have
weekly
been.
thing.
I bet it might have been nice not having to talk about COVID for a change.
It was good not to talk about COVID, but thank y'all. Thank y'all very much. Seriously.
Pleasure to work with you
Awesome.
guys. Take care.
Thanks, Tucker. Thanks.
Take care.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Thank you, Tucker.